computer rooms tend to get hot because of the computers, and they don't have the ability to differentiate rooms, so they can either freeze this whole floor, which they do sometimes, or they can let these rooms heat up. But it's bad for the computers to let them heat up, and they've had the server room occasionally has just crashed because when computers get too hot, they shut off. So. Okay, so I'm already recording, I think. Yeah, I'm recording. So let's get up. What I'll do is I'll get up Vizio. Could you get Vizio downloaded?
Yeah.
Good.
No, I haven't downloaded my computer.
Oh.
I will do that.
So I'm just going to do the class diagrams again. We're up there. Okay. So I'll give you. Are you guys ready? Yeah. It's weird. Attendance is better on the day when it's nice out. All right. I'm going to at least make that 100%. So I'm trying to think of what class I want to do. Let's do I'm going to make like a logging class. And do I want to call this like a data class? It's a class to talk to the database. Because when you do a login, you basically pass the username and password to something that then checks the database and then comes back with a true or false, right? So I'll just, for lack, it would probably be not named data class, but the login would have just the username. I'm not going to give it a type, but it'll be a string, and password. And I'm going to say it has a method. Validate password. Is this hard to see?
Yeah.
All right, so let me see if I can make it. Is it partially? It's probably the. I'm going to go. Let's see. Design. I'm going to try to find a black and white. Is that easier? Still need bigger. But if I make it real big, then we have other problems. How's that? Okay. So it's going to pass the user and the password. So I'll just do string. So let's, the data class, what do we, I'm trying to think of what method we would want here that would do this. Let's just say really generic. This makes a lot of sense, but I just want to show the most typical relationship between things is association. And it's just a line, right? You can hook it anywhere. So all association means is that this class calls a method in this class. Does that make sense? So I was thinking that inside of this, it calls the check database, and then the check database, whether it's good or bad, right? So, and I'm not being very careful about these methods, but all that association means is that, oops, I didn't want file, I want home. I want a text. Association just means that one class calls something in another class. So they're associated.
which direction.
No, it doesn't really matter which direction. Notice there's no arrows here. There's nothing there. You know, association just means a class calls a method in another class. Okay, and that happens a lot. So that's a real common relationship between classes. Just that one class calls a method to another class. And it's just represented as a line. No arrows, nothing to it. Does that make sense? As I said, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to try to create code samples, and I'll try to make them functional so you can see things work. And then I'll post them so we can play with them. But I don't want to spend an hour and a half in this warm room coding. So I will do it at home and bring it Tuesday. I'll probably do it in Java. So, any questions on association? It's the simplest kind of thing. One class just talks to another by calling a method. So calling a method can mean passing variables, so probably string and password would be over there. It could also mean passing an object. It could, and then it also handling the return type, right? That's all kind of part of that. So the other kind of relationship, which you already know, most of you are just fine with this, is I'm going to just do like think of a good example of this off the top of my head. Well, the one we did before, user, and then I'm just going to do admin user, and then I inherit. Okay, so I just have inheritance, and I've still made my pointer rule. This is kind of a real example, and why is that hooking down there? There we go. So most of you know in here, I really hate this sometimes. I just want it to go to the middle. Come on, down here, and I don't want it to be here. Oh well, let it connect to the middle. So inheritance is basically, you know inheritance. Who doesn't? If you don't, that's fine. Inheritance is the idea where you have a general class, sometimes abstract, where you can't use it. And then you have classes that inherit from it, meaning they get all of the stuff that's in this that is public for free, and then they add whatever is different. One of the things to know about inheritance is that this should be the most general and this should be more specific. And they should be of the same kind. You don't want to inherit from something that is not the same kind of thing. You don't want to user maybe then inherit probably would directly from the user, because it's a little bit different thing than a user. We have all sorts of things up here that don't relate to log. Now you might have one thing that relates, but you wouldn't have, you'd have extra stuff that you don't need. So when you do this, this should be a type of user, right? And if you do, like in mine, it's supposed to be, if you had a thing like a fan, so I might actually do that with look that I did for Hacker, the fan type of user, the artist type of user, the new user, although sure different enough, I'm sure I would inherit them. Does that make sense? Inheritance should be like, and it should be a more like and a more specific. Always pointer. to the more abstract. Does that make sense? And inheritance is really powerful to talk about it, but it's also overused by most estimates of object-oriented, because it's so easy that there's a tendency to overuse it, and there are other ways you can do things. So I'm going to show another thing here. Actually, I may just make a new, because this is so big. Yeah, I guess I could do it on this page. So I'm going to do a course. And remember, we had course, and it had things like, I'm not going to do all of them, but it had things like the name and the number. Again, I'm a little bit faster on the slide. And it had like credits, etc. And then let's do our certificate. And I'm not going to do everything that's in a certificate, but one of the things that was in a certificate is a list of courses, right? So list course. I'll make that a capital to go with it. Does that make sense? So there's a relationship here that's a little bit different than inheritance. And it could be one of two things depending on your, what? It's actually not association, it's either composition or in composition, let's see if I can make that thing bigger. I'm just going to make it extra large. See if that makes it better. It's a little better. Come on. I have to select the line. Jumbo. All right. Then the point of making a jumbo so you can see it. But if it is a black diamond like this, what this means is that the course exists only in certificate. And if you were to destroy the certificate, the courses would go away. That's actually not true of the app as we designed it, but that's what it would mean. So that's one kind of relationship. Course is an object that exists inside a certificate, right? The other thing it would, and the thing that it actually is association. Not association, aggregation. Notice it has a open arrow. That just means that it exists inside of here, inside of this class, but it has an independent existence as well. So course is a class that exists by itself, but inside of, for its relation to certificate is that it is contained inside a certificate. If it's the black diamond, it means it's contained inside a certificate. And if I were to like remove this class, then all the courses would go away as well. There's an example of this that you guys use. Well, I don't know. How do you do your events? Have you done events in Java? If you create an event in a form for Java, one of the typical ways to do it is to create a private class inside class.
Inner classes.
Right, so inner classes. Yeah. So an inner class would have this relationship. Okay. When you destroy the outer class, the inner class goes away too.
You were doing that now with generic stuff, right?
Yeah.
So the composition is like inner class.
Yeah, composition is like an inner class. Another example of it, though this is a Microsoft example. Has anybody ever done a data set? I know when I'm videotaping, you can't see these on the video. Videotaping, that's a bit of an acronym.
Should we turn your
Even if I turn the screen, I'd have to turn down. I could do that, I guess. Or I could just take a picture of it and add it. I don't know if this is all that relevant anyway, but a data set in a Microsoft thing has several, so there's a data set class. And the data set is really a container for other classes. One of the classes that it contains is a data row. Actually, one of the classes it contains is a data table. So it would have that black diamond relationship, right? There's its composition. The data tables only exist inside the data set, and there can be more than one. Inside the data table, there's an object called data row. And again, it has that composition relationship to data table. If you destroy the table, the rows go away. Guess what? Inside the row, there is an object called data column. And the data column has a relation, so that if the row goes away, the column goes away. So it's a series of nested classes. There's a data set itself, which is a container of data tables. And then the data tables contain data rows. And the data rows contain data columns. And each one of those things is a separate object, which is kind of neat. I mean, I could diagram it on here too, I suppose. This one, obviously. Yes. What you can do, I mean, this is Microsoft, is you can just load it. You do what they call a data reader, and you can just load it into a data set. So you don't have to write any code to loop things into it. You just attach it to a database, and it'll fill this thing. Literally 2 lines of code. And then another neat thing about this is totally irrelevant to what we're doing except for the composition element. It can be output as XML. Data set dot, I forget the actual thing. It's like export XML or something. And we'll also read XML as well as data XML. So it's a neat object. A lot of people in the Microsoft world said because it's such a neat object, it's overused. So does that make sense? I mean, really, as I said, I just wanted to give you a view, really kind of it's just 2 classes. Inheritance, you kind of know, it's one where one class inherits from the other, which means it gets to keep all of the public. You probably haven't encountered the other 2, and these are the 2 types of the object, it contains another object, and it's self-contained, it's sealed in the sense that if you destroy this object, you destroy all these, right? They go away with it. The objects have a container object, the other objects still have an output. The other existing outside of that. These are a bit subtle. This one is useful, this one isn't, so you could actually almost get away with just calling this association. Now, the only other thing that we should probably talk about, but I'm not sure if now is the time, are interfaces. Do you guys know interfaces? Yeah.
On certificates to course that.
I have both of them, and it can't be both.
It can't be both, that's what.
Yeah, so it would be that. It would be aggregation. Let me, just because, so I don't the Microsoft one really quick. So I'll do the class. I'll call it a data set, which is what Microsoft calls it. And basically what it has is, I'm going to call it a list, although I think it's actually a collection of, and they call them data tables. Now, the thing about the data tables, they can exist outside of a data set, but if they're in the data set, so. The only other thing that's in here is there's also a collection of, let's call it a list. And it has some methods too, I guess, if I were to do this. It has a list of, what do I want to call them? Let's call them relationships. It stores the relationships between tables. Does that make sense? Or constraints might be a better word. But I'll call it relationships. It stores, not because you can store multiple tables, it actually can store the relationships between constraints that are on those tables. That being said, you probably don't want to, because it will only function if it can all load into RAM. So it all has to be in RAM to work. So if you get too big a load, and then it has a couple of methods which are load. I'm going to call them out, and some others, but we'll just let it be like that. I don't know what that was. All right, so I'm going to do the table, data table. I'm not going to put all the it has data row as and I'll do the composition. At the container, let me change that. And then inside the table, there are data class. And I'm going to do this. The container. Okay, and the data columns have properties like data value, data type, etc. So that's an example of composition, the one I drew up there. What did I leave out? Table, data column. Oh, I left out data row. Let's just make this data. And then I'll add a column. That way I have a picture here that I can post. Now, one thing I want to say about your assignment, you may have no examples of composition, right? If you're actually just dealing with the classes that you have that are relevant to what you're doing, there may be no composition. You don't actually have any aggregation, although you probably do, in the sense that you probably have other classes that hold instances of other classes. I mean, that's fairly typical. You may not think about it yet, but we'll look at those kinds of things. So you may not have every one of these. Association, I'm sure you will have. Let's go back and just look at that. And I'll write out an example of what each of these are too. But association, I'm sure you have. Inheritance, you probably force. There's someone have any objects set up for inheritance? Force it. Think of the relationships the classes actually have. Aggregation, as I said, is where a class is contained in another but has its own existence. That is a possibility. That's usually fairly common. So social inheritance, that you will probably have. Composition, much less. But those are all four relationships. The other set is the interface. The instance for interfaces, and we will look at your classes and we'll look at that. If you find, so an interface is usually a set of methods, signatures. The methods don't have any content. They're just method signatures. And what they are basically is a contract. So I'm just going to say add run. Do these as methods. I'm making it as generic as possible. And just going to and actually record is probably just add, remove, and edit. So the record. If I do this, sorry. If you type along with me, you end up deleting a lot. So class, whatever class it is, and implementing this in UML looks just like inheritance. They actually do have an interface realization. Notice it's the same thing as the inheritance symbol, except they make it as dot. But in UML, the inheritance symbol is perfectly fine. What that means is that this class has to have add, remove, and whatever it is. Right? An interface makes a requirement that the class implement those methods. This is really useful in a lot of situations, because if you know that a class inherits or implements an interface, you know that it has certain methods that you can call, right?
Does that mean you don't have to list it in the thing?
You do have to give it a body, but you don't necessarily have to list it in the diagram, because you are getting it. It's kind of like inheritance. List what's in the parent and the child, even though they're there. Does that make? In the diagram, they generally don't list these because that means they have to be there. It already is sort of listed. And we'll talk about interfaces too. They're really important in object-oriented theory. One of the things that Microsoft will do, if you want to attach like a class that you designed, you want it to be able to go into one of their controls and be listed. To implement the interface is listable as those two interfaces, because their controls call certain methods that are required. So if you implement those interfaces, those methods will be there. And you can do whatever you want in those methods, basically, but they have to be there. And they have to have a certain return type, right? So do you guys have questions on that? Let's too quickly because I want to let you get to work, and we're now above. Yeah.
Definition of interface realization.
What?
It's the guideline.
That's the interface realization. Yeah. This Visio makes a distinction. So the interface is like this. There's also another interface thing they have. Actually, I think they did away with it. They used to have another interface symbol, which was just like a little line and then a little. It was anyway. They don't have it in here. It's not usually treated as a real relation because I think that's the only one. And directed association. Notice, now I'm just going to bring those over and we'll talk about them, although we aren't actually, these are not usually considered, usually it's just association and aggregation composition. It's usually just those four. Microsoft here gives you a couple of extra. Directed association would assume that the call is only going one way and that it can only go one way. I suspect that that would be for something like a Sentinel class that's constantly pinging or something. Although it still get information back, so I'm not sure. But it always goes one way, doesn't come back. And the other, dependency, this is the dependency, would be that one class is stupid. If you're doing good, happen very much. You shouldn't have classes dependent on another one. But it does happen sometimes.
Isn't in a way the pointing at the arrow kind of counterintuitive?
I think it's a little bit counterintuitive. It tends to point towards, all right, so for the inheritance and the interface, it points towards the parent class or the class that, so it's inheriting from this, so it's basically the parent, even though it's lightweight class interface.
But I thought the interface was implemented.
It is, but it's actually in terms of, like with C#, it doesn't distinguish. It's just a colon for an interface or a class. The only difference is that you can implement multiple interfaces and you can only implement one class or inherit from one class. Java is a little clearer what you're doing because Java says extends or implements. Right? So Java is a little clearer about what's going on. But C# actually follows the C++ pattern of the colon for inheritance and implementation. Let's look. I may document this a little before I post it. And I will do some code, but let's see if I can load. Let me save this. One of the problems with the heat today is it's so humid too. Yeah, I'm not going to go on too much longer, but I do want to do a little bit more. So what I wanted to do, I don't know if I can get this big in a way that we can see it very well. Is that readable, kind of? Now I can't draw in this mode, but at least I can get all of the diagrams up there. But what would be the relationships between these kinds of classes, if any? And again, I'm saying that there probably isn't. So here we have, let's think about, show. So here we have a venue, right? These are all just fields. What would be the relationship between show and and venue. What?
It's got add show.
Yeah, so it's got add show. Notice it has a list of shows. So it's, you could probably say it's at least aggregation, which is what you're saying, right? Because this is going to have objects of the type show inside of it, right? It's going to have a list of them. So each venue can have a list of shows. And then it has add and edit and etc. So we also, this one has a relationship with artist, right? The same kind of relationship. In the sense that artist and artist is contained in here, so probably a venue aggregation type. Does that make sense for that? Fan has a similar kind of relation to artist and to alert. And I would almost put alert as composition. It might not exist separate from the fan, so except I think I have alert generated alert down here. So here I would just do it as association. This creates an alert, but this is the actual alert, right? So that's, I would think it's just an association. What else? This probably has associations with venue, fan, and artist, right? It just associates with them. Does that make sense? I don't have any inheritance here. That doesn't mean that there couldn't be, but I'm not sure if I see it off the bat. Do you guys see any classes? I mean, these aren't necessarily your only classes, by the way. It's just ones I came up with at the time.
Fan, inherit, and login.
I don't think so, because there's too much
But they're not
difference.
exactly the same.
So if there's fan, there's really not a lot of places where you could do login here. I mean, my brain is gone. He messes me up. I don't see, if we had other kinds of users besides the fan, maybe.
Admin.
Possibly, although this isn't really an admin user, it's just some admin functions. There are the classes that would probably need to be added to this. As you start working with it, you suddenly realize that there's probably a lot of classes that it needs. I intend to build this actually, hopefully to show you guys, and I'll try to do it with a NoSQL database. I was considering building it in Python, but I think I might build it in C#. Python, the class structure isn't as clear. So I don't see any inheritance, and as I said, don't force it if you can't find it in your own. I don't see any actual composition, but there's some aggregation where things relate to each other, and there's a couple of examples of association. You might be able to expand on this, because as I said, when I start building it, you might find that there are relationships. Now, one of the things that I would talk about too, notice how this has add show, edit show, add artist, remove artist, add artist, remove artist, add genre, remove genre, remove alerts. So another one with this one has add artist, add fan, add venue, though you might have to, when you start seeing the same methods over and over again, best form is to extract them out into an interface and then just implement the interface. There's a couple of ways you could do this. So there's a couple of add shows, like this one, well, this generates the alert. So this would probably have like add show, call add show and do some things inside the alert. But you could have separate interface for show and a separate interface for artist, or you could abstract it out even further, and instead of add, show, add, you could just do it like I was doing, add, edit, and just do add, edit, and remove. I didn't have edit everywhere, so that's a question: do you want to edit everywhere, or just add and remove? And you could put those into an interface, and you could do kind of like my interface. Actually, not there anymore, but where you change out the data type from show to artist. I mean, from to object. Right, because you could pass object, everything inherits from object. And one of the advantages of object is that you, in inheritance, you can always substitute a child for a parent. You can't go the other way necessarily. But you can, if it's object, you can put artist in there. And you can substitute it for artist. If it's a show, you can substitute show for object. You can always substitute the child for the parent. And again, that's part of the power of the object-oriented thing. So it can make it very generic. The other way to do this, of course, is just pure generics. But I don't know if I want to go into teaching how to do that. You could create generic functions and generic classes. My brain is mush. So, do you guys, did this give you any kind of basis for this?
You did.
So what I will do next time is try to get more particular and maybe a little bit more focused on some of this. But I hope I gave you enough that if you're done with the, setting up, start thinking about what kinds of relationships they have. Also, if you really can't stand this heat, one, you could work in that other room, which is much cooler, or you can, move elsewhere if you want, if it's just too hot in here. We're moving up above 80 slowly. Yeah.
Would it be possible, just out of curiosity, to put an interface diagram on that?
I could put an interface on this.
Would it be similar to, or would it be a type where you only have methods?
Yes, interfaces generally only have methods. It is actually, and I don't understand why, but some languages have extended the abilities of interfaces to also include fields. But just by definition overall, interfaces were just method signatures. But some languages have expanded their ability to, so that they become not much different than a class. And the question, and it's a question we're not going to deal with too much here, but you always have a choice of whether to abstract things into an interface or an abstract class. So if you need the methods and stuff, you could create an abstract class too. But yes, we could do an interface here. One of the things I'm going to do with this, I might even work on it now while you guys work, is to create a secondary diagram where I show relationships between these things. And maybe expand it a little to provide more. I wonder if we could try that. Yeah, the door, the more we can.
I can't tell. I think that's clear.
Is there what is this?
Oh.
Yeah, the more we can have the doors open, the better.
You say we're gonna work on this?
Yeah, you can work now. I'm done talking. I'll add some stuff next time. Sure. Sure. You got smoke. You got watch this one.
Yes, well, because I get to go outside. It's a go
It's nice outside. Is that not the way that little thing is?
They don't know you.
Maybe it died. Maybe it finally died. Bring a wedge of wood for the next one.
Yeah.
I'm not much use.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring up the other one and comment it, and then I will work on this one if I can take the heat.
Well, at first I thought this was a tourism, like everyone would you know, the regular.
Yeah. Syrup. They're on smoke break. For today? Yeah. I think next week. Oh, yeah. No. Personal laptop and on my phone have been randomly starting audiobooks.
Huh.
Just randomly. I don't know what's going on. It's funny though. Yeah, except the laptop's doing it in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're just,
Add some more.
no, unless you think that there are some that are really needed on the domain level. What do you mean
Yeah, I
by,
feel like there probably should be, 'cause we didn't have like substitution on there.
oh, yeah, go ahead and add it.
I
Maybe,
think I'm gonna just like
Then there's
modify
like
it
certificate course.
when they get back
I'm
from
looking
their
at the
smoke break.
ERD.
So
Yeah,
basically,
there's
the whole
probably a class
assignment
for most of
next
those, so
month
like
is just to create
certificate for
those
sure,
relationships.
Right,
certificate
we
of
had a
course.
certificate, we have a course. There's not a
Yeah.
I
certificate
think the main.
course.
Right.
is
Well, so there's a
revise
Or
cert-
that's, I guess that's just.
previous assignments.
So there's a
Other
course.
than classes.
Yeah, don't worry about the certificate course, but the way you deal with that in a class is that your certificate contains a list of courses.
Right.
That's actually how you handle the relationship. It's different than it is in the database.
So we'll do that in
Should
aggregation.
have been an interface with the
Yeah.
appropriate.
Because also courses, students can track courses.
Right.
So can a class have more than one relationship to something else?
Yes, it can. Well, a class can be related to several other classes.
Not every.
So we're just making.
Yeah, no, I think we can just use some characters back. That's just what I resubmitted for last week.
This might be good.
But we can look at it before we.
So we did.
It's what I just revised it. Remember we submitted it, we were missing some things, so I just added in a few more classes, like course and student. Yeah, it's a section where they need to.
Composition.
Right, if you're,
Okay.
it wouldn't really make sense.
I was talking about the NPI.
Oh, the introduction, yeah, that's the,
Aggregation. No, it's like, it's supposed to be composition, because if the course is gone, the section.
yeah.
That's true. There wouldn't be any section. Well, yeah, probably.
Oh, in section we do have course, yeah, so it would be,
Composition. Which is.
yeah.
needed, the section should not.
And I just realized. Great. And
Steve, the diamond goes to the.
The diamond goes to the parent. Actually, I have the diamond.
And that needs to be capitalized.
I think the diamond does go to the parent. I have it backwards here.
Okay. And we can put the little tag up there. We don't need certificate. Seems like courses with. Yeah, it has courses in it.
Maybe.
So it needs to, yeah, we can move stuff around.
Yeah, actually, so I did do that the wrong way.
No, it's maybe it's like an aggregation. Aggregation can even have a certificate. Doesn't have to.
Although it has.
So you're more likely rather than the blood.
Yeah, which one's that?
The composition. No, the aggregation is the. So Steve, when you say when you do aggregation, it is like it stays, but it's more like independent.
It has some independence. So if I were to delete the certificate here, there would still be courses.
Okay, perfect, because we need to add or remove courses from that. And so we don't want it to be, we don't want to zap it like we said. Okay,
And user involved.
yeah, and then the same with admin. I think those will inherit from these.
Maybe it
Oh,
has,
this is for the editing.
maybe it inherits courses and certification. Because there's they can edit.
Yeah, they can edit.
So it can be one. Or association.
Yeah, that might be safer.
Association. Like, it should be middle, I guess. Association. Is association. Nice.
And then. Oh, there is a laser. I kind of wonder if we do. Well, I mean, yes. This seems like.
Are they allowed to?
See, that's why I. Because what's the difference between?
Because if this happens, that means I'm gonna keep it.
Well, maybe user is.
Super user.
No, maybe. Yeah, so it's like with editing.
Oh, I like your story, by the way.
Because we wanted a generic user.
I like your story, by the way. It's very moving.
When that number
I
total.
can't remember what argument was.
That's why I said that is wrong.
Because,
Not
Oh.
the two.
we want to treat it as kind of generic in the class.
At first, I can't believe it. At first time I read that, it was more of a thing. I think it's
Yeah,
Seems more obvious.
student, so.
one class. But in fact, I go back to check.
But
Officially, it's only 2 units. Now, in the public,
that class has section.
section 4, maybe to
Yeah,
7.
what is
No,
section, the section number?
Maybe because,
47.
oh, probably because it has.
It is
But do we have it anywhere else? It's like,
people don't know.
that might be really nice.
Yeah.
I still think that it's
What I assume is because the section has its course.
Oh, we have section here.
But we have
Sorry.
the course inside
It
here.
is the correct side of it.
That's why we just
So,
have the section.
Yeah.
Instead of having to put the course.
yeah. Yeah.
That's
I don't
what I
even
assume
like
is
time when I
happening.
don't get
Yeah.
when I
Section is
writing it, I enjoy
part of the
it.
course.
When it's
Is, there's the
I mean,
section.
a lot of changing.
Yeah, how does that,
Like,
what would that be? What is that just
Like, there's like a,
the kind of the quarters?
Yeah.
The quarters.
no, like, so there's like, there's like 155. There's
Yeah.
like class A, like the morning class.
Oh,
and the afternoon
okay.
class,
Okay.
that section.
I get it. Okay, so the section is specific version.
Or if it's more being specifically like divided by
That's
time.
kind of, yeah, that's kind of almost,
Oh, really?
So no, we need to do this too.
yeah, we kind of started on it, but,
No, you're on that over here.
So we were talking.
Because it's too cold out there.
Usually it's most likely a student because it has everything.
Okay, so why don't we do this?
yeah, what is the use?
We do it like this, that way we have them. So this is the user. And under the user,
So these are the super master
yeah.
class.
Oh, we already had the chart, so we just have to do the real.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're
but
just
also
trying
gonna-
to just get that modified.
We just.
so these are both gonna inherit from here as well as this. Let's move this over here. Grab this one. Grab this one, put it down here.
Okay, yeah, I know, those connectors. Yeah, the pain of
So,
my.
I'm doing that, and then we put, so we're gonna have inheritance.
There's also this.
They're gonna come to here,
That's all it is.
and then this is gonna inherit, right?
Yeah. It's to the higher level.
No, whatever. String.
You're gonna be mushy for a little bit.
Okay, that's a new class, right? I call you right back. I call you right back.
Oh, yeah, it's certificates.
This is also from the AGE Learning Center. Yes. Here.
A student.
Oh, it's supposed to be get to, right?
Right? At least they're the same guy.
Yeah.
Log in. Doesn't really inherit anything, But
And that's
it
fine.
but it has an association
With the.
with you.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Like, the,
There you go.
So just check, chemical status.
Right?
We
aggregation.
need another
was-
doc, don't we? Google Doc.
Yes. So, well, here, I'll, yeah,
Are you doing it?
I'll just do it because I have it on here. Okay, so what else do we have in here?